Hello again, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of CAD Lessons with me, Dave Johnston. I'm a production manager. I've been doing CAD or using CAD to solve live event and production problems for over a decade now. Today, again, as normal, I'm joined by, introduce yourselves. Let's go with Dom first. You're there on screen right now.
Good afternoon, Dominic Main here. I do CAD, production CAD, and lighting design, and you'll most probably see me on site somewhere.
Fantastic. And Dick is next in line on the Google Hangouts I'm seeing.
Hello, I'm Dick Crabb. I'm a sound engineer, sound designer, and I use CAD in a very, very basic fashion and try and input to people like Dom and Tom.
Fabulous. And then up next we have...
Good afternoon, it's Tom White. I do technical design drawings for live events and theatre and look forward to this session today.
Fantastic. So we just thought we'd start today by asking, got any work? So we'll just go around the room, tell us a little bit about any developments that have come along this week. I can still confirm that as a production manager, I have no work, but we're hoping that that will start to change over the next little while. So let's go in the same order. So Dom, has anything changed for you this past week?
No, still firmly furloughed this week. Not a lot happening. There are good conversations happening in the background. There's been some encouraging talk in various channels about people trying to work out how we can start again with best practice. And hopefully, having had some press release from Germany yesterday, the German government have said that business-to-business meetings should start with all the right measures taken to allow them to happen safely. So hopefully our announcement on Sunday will give us some direction of that, and then we can start planning how we do it safely.
Fantastic.
Good conversations happening.
Brilliant. And now the order's changed on Hangouts, but we're going to go to Tom next. How about you, Tom? Anything for you changed over the last week?
Change-wise, I finished my last project on Monday, which was not the nicest feeling, but yeah, I was lucky to have quite an interesting project to finish with. Future-wise, I don't have anything necessarily to update anyone with, but I'm just trying to kind of learn new techniques in different parts of the industry, but nothing fixed at this moment.
Fantastic. I think that's the reality that a lot of people are living with at the moment, certainly in our industry and certainly as freelancers in this community. It's there's a lot of people with nothing for the foreseeable future. How about you, Dick?
But I may have to unfurl myself for a couple of days next week. There's talk of a little virtual event, and we're just waiting for the record company to say yes and actually put their money where their mouth is. So fingers crossed this time next week, I might not be able to do the CAD session if it's on a Thursday.
Oh,
You never know your luck. I'm
Wow.
optimistic.
We will change it. We will not miss you.
We'll cross our fingers for you because I think that's fantastic news.
Yeah.
You know, I think the virtual event thing is obviously a real thing, and there are quite a lot of people trying to do all kinds of things in that space at the moment. But yeah, I think any work is good work as far as freelance community is concerned. So brilliant. I thought the session last time was great. It was all about printing, how to use paper space, how to set it up, and we really could have spent quite a bit longer on it again. So we're kind of planning to try and put together some little I don't know what the word is, some little kind of short instructional videos so that if you're just trying to remember one particular thing, then you can actually we'll find a way to just search for that and then just quickly remember how to, create a block or how to do something or other. But yeah, it will give us a bit longer on some of that. But Dick, why don't you tell us since last session, how have your drawings improved? I think it's kept us all really interested with how you're kind of developing and how you're kind of troubleshooting things and what you've been up to. So
I'm going to take the risk and be thoroughly above my station. Some of you will have seen this on Facebook and what have you. Hopefully you can see my screen. Here we go.
It's just coming in. Wonderful.
So this is a sort of a little mock-up of a real venue, a real show, and trying to incorporate some of the ideas. So the first idea that was, I think, back in week 2, rather than dobbing loudspeakers on one by one and having them mashed all over the place, learning that in DraftSight it's called modify pattern, and you can get the computer to do what computers are good at and put them out for you, so that they all appear in the right place at the right spacings.
Oh, perfect. So instead of it being called array, which is what it's called in CAD, I'm not sure. Don, what's it called in Vectorworks? Is it called array? Is it called? But in DraftSight,
What's
it's
it
called
called?
pattern.
Pattern for doing array. Yes. Look
Sorry,
it
I
up very quickly.
totally
Come back
put
to
you
me.
on the
Yes,
spot there. I'll come back to
I
you.
was in the middle
Anyway,
of
sorry.
drawing my bit for later.
You weren't listening. Sorry, carry on,
No, I
Dick.
wasn't listening.
We then, in week 3, we learnt about XREFs, and I've eulogized about this. Of these colored blobs are from D&B's array calc. The yellows are the louder bits, dark green, light greens, darker greens, and blues are the quieter bits. This is
How much quieter,
this
Dick? What
was
sort of range there are you talking
so
about?
those are 6 dB steps.
Okay, gotcha.
So in sound terms, 3 dB is a smidge, 6 dB is a bit, and 10 dB is about half as loud.
What a great
Um,
way of putting it. So
well,
most people
yeah.
can't really tell 3 dB necessarily, could they? But 6 dB, some people can start to hear, and 10 dB people can definitely hear, can't they?
When somebody says, "Can you turn it up just a smidge?" they mean 3 dB.
Yeah.
A bit, they mean 6 dB. So
When they say make it a bit
a...
greener, what do they normally mean by that?
Well, that's just turn it down then, isn't it? Making things, or is that bluer? Anyway,
Sorry.
and then so these are all different layers. We learned about turning layers on and off within viewports, which is great. And then this one is a zoom in without, for this particular part of the drawing, without the pretty colored overlay, and nice
Gotcha.
big texts of how far from the walls you'd want your speakers to be on the truss.
So in DraftSight, you've created another viewport there into the model space, and we're seeing the same model, the same drawing effectively, with some of the layers turned off. So that's brilliant. It presents really nicely, actually, the way you've laid that out. And then you've got dimensions on there, which is obviously crucial.
This next little one here, this is very much for me to learn how to spin something. So for Noise Boys, we see these beautiful big plans, truss plans that the Lampies bring out with the business end or in lots of detail, and then lots of small trusses split up if need be, if it's a big room, and put into the plan off scale. To show what's on them. So that this is my first part of learning that. Then Tom introduced us to attributes that I got enormously excited about, and
Why was
how
that?
to export them. So this is in this particular. So this is Excel. This is an export out of the. There's two types of symbols in this particular drawing. There's the D&B Y10 and the D&B E8.
And have you downloaded those, or have you just kind of created those yourself? Like, how did you get to those models?
Yeah, so D&B have them in both 2 and 3D, as a spoiler for later on, but they are big
technical drawings.
Engineering CADs.
Engineering plans,
and there's way more information than you ever need. The insert point is totally useless position. So I've taken them, stripped them all out, brought them back to their bare bones, and something simple. And at this stage, so it has got things like weights. The weights are automatically on them. Speaker patch information you can put on the drawing and then export it to an Excel sheet. What you're going to use it for, where it's going to go. And Dominic and I had a little bit of a chat about where you should actually convey the information. So this has got the amplifier patch in, but actually, is this the right place to do it? I think probably not is the answer. This is very much a learning.
But I think
But
that's
this
really
is
interesting, isn't it? Because the question there is like, who is this drawing for, right? And so as you're building out this plan, like it looks absolutely beautiful to me, but I don't actually necessarily need all of that information. Whereas if you were producing it for a local sound company, that just really helps to communicate a lot about where your head's at and why you're putting boxes where you're putting them, um, and how you want
absolutely,
that system configured. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
and I think it's something we slightly touched on last week about where do we see the future, and I think that as an ability for me, so on various jobs, the Cisco's, the Gartners, I run large crews, many of whom are uh, local crew, for whom English is not the first language. This is a piece of paper that you can actually print out, and the aim is for me to create a piece of paper that says, here is everything you need to rig this room without me.
yeah,
Um,
brilliant.
and as Dave points out, the colored maps, they may be pretty, but actually they're conveying an information for the rental company of this is why I've chosen that loudspeaker. And it's there's no English in this really.
Yeah, it's just
There's
pictures, but it
it's
communicates so
pictures,
much
but it
very simply. Yeah,
communicates things. Um,
brilliant.
and finally, here's an imported PDF from D&B's array calcs. Now, obviously, there isn't a line array in this room, but this again is just me understanding that this is a PDF that I can import onto this drawing and print it all out as one.
Amazing. That's so cool. And it's quite exciting, I think, for me and Dom and Tom to kind of see your journey and see like how much you've I guess learned in a really really useful way. Like we've taught some really kind of some of the essentials in terms of how you do things, and you've kind of taken that away and actually looked at, right, how do I apply this in my context to
It's
achieve, better delivery? And I love that.
and
It's
this is what I hope to kind of inspire Tom and Dom is to talk about the concepts. As I said off air, Google knows everything. We've just got to learn what to ask Google. Other search engines are available. But the whole attributes thing was complete news to me. I'd never even heard of them before. And suddenly, wow.
Yeah, and like next time you come to do a drawing, you've got all your symbols ready, or you've got all your blocks ready, that actually you can just drop them in and all that information is there, or you can tweak it as appropriate if it's an amp patch or whatever.
Yeah.
Or yeah, truss.
By the way, the Excel thing, it links back to Excel. So if I change it in my Excel sheet, it comes
Updates
back
it here as well.
and
Nice.
updates it on the print.
Very, very good. Very good. So yeah, I mean, we're so encouraged, I think, by that. And if there's anyone else that wants to come on and show us any work that they've been doing, or ways in which they've been inspired to try and kind of make their own, do their own thing and apply it in their own context, that would be absolutely amazing. So today we're going to take the next 15 minutes just to have a very quick look at 3D. So we're going to look at why we bother using 3D and when. So I guess we'll just have a little initial conversation around that. So when I first started, I kind of started in 3D. I know there's an awful lot of people out there that kind of started in 2D, but I never really drew stuff in 2D. Like most of the problems I was trying to solve were usually a 3D problem. It was like, is that lamp going to hang off that truss and bash into that piece of set, or is that speaker going to do that, or whatever? So that seems to me to be a 3D problem. And I kept coming across all these people that would send me 2D stuff, and I'd just be like, but you're working in 3D. I didn't really understand, I guess where they were coming from with that. But Dom or Tom, like, what's your experience of that? Like, Tom, did you start in 2D, or did you go straight to 3D, or kind of when did you get involved in 3D, I suppose is the question.
I started in 2D, and while I was at a scenery company, I did all the work in 2D. And it wasn't until I went freelance quite a few years ago, I started in 3D, and it was for Brilliant Stages, and it was how they portrayed a story to the shop floor. And it was a really fantastic way of portraying a story, because when you're drawing something in 3D, you can easily do a front elevation, a plan, a section, an isometric relatively at a click of a button. In comparison, when you do it in 2D, you have to repeat your drawing multiple times, And as I learned in the first 3 or 4 years of my drafting career, when you do things 3 or 4 times, you're going to get one of them wrong. And so, kind of since the Brilliant Stages experience, I've done predominantly 3D. But of course, as I think we've discussed previously, you can't always get everything in 3D. So there are some circumstances where you either mush a 2D and a 3D drawing together, or it's going to tell a story easier if it's only in 2D. So that could be a specific Lexus car, or it could be a very specific JMT chair or something like that. So that might be a reason not to do it in 3D.
Brilliant. I think the other thing for me is like I sometimes get a bit carried away trying to do everything in 3D. And often actually I just need to stay really focused and solve the problem that I'm trying to solve, rather than just get carried away trying to make everything, beautiful 3D. Like, are there still things that you specifically use for 2D, and things that you specifically do in 3D, or like, or do you tend to just always do one or the other for certain types of things? So like for chairs, for example, is that you normally a 2D thing or a 3D thing, or?
Yeah, so if it's an auditorium plan, almost always excluding the stage, I would do it in 2D. And the reason for that is because the story I need to tell might include hatches, which are much easier in 2D. The hatch might tell you a fire route, for example. You might need to count the chairs quickly. You might desire to number the chairs with attributes, and the attributes are easier to visually portray in 2D. But for almost any kind of, where I say a broken out drawing is an A3 piece of paper that's printable, and that will be of a set element. So that could be a scenic wall, or it could be a piece of truss with a specific type of fitting attached to it. So those kind of drawings I always do in 3D, because I can do a plan, an elevation, section, and isometric at a click of a button, and it will portray to the person I'm trying to explain something, or to the end user, something better than I can do in 2D, and more importantly, much quicker.
Cool, brilliant. And how about you, Dom? I guess the other thing that's fascinating about Dom's workflow is he's kind of done quite a bit in AutoCAD and quite a lot in Vectorworks. So actually, from this kind of session onwards, we're planning to try and do both. So Tom will do kind of the AutoCAD stuff, and Dom will do a bit of the Vectorworks demo stuff, just so that, especially with this kind of new topic, 3D, we kind of start to step through, with both of those software packages in tandem. And Dick, if you're up for it, we'll show DraftSight as well. I mean, they're different software with different uses at different price points. So, yeah, there's it almost the opportunity to share a bit more widely be really useful. But Dom, when did you
Just,
first
just
start?
before you go on
Sorry,
to
go on.
the practicalities, Dave,
Yeah.
what's the beauty of 3D as opposed to? So I would do, the only time I would go 3D is speakers, sight lines. Is it going to foul the truss screen? And I would then just do a simple 2D elevation that says yes, they need to go high, or no, they're fine. What's the big plus for 3D for the
So
non-designer?
So for me, it's time saving, I would say, on the whole. So, and it's also a bit of error avoidance. So I think Tom kind of made a similar point, really. The If you draw something in 3D, you draw it once, and when you look at it in those different ways, and you look at it in combination from different angles, it, yeah, you're not redrawing it, and you're not drawing an elevation and then drawing a plan. So it's kind of it's there and it's done. So to my mind, it's faster. I'm going to tease you ever so slightly here, Dick, as well. Like the we did a job together in Sydney, which uh, the designers had come up with this amazing sort of fake ceiling, floaty, kind of cloudy thing going on. But every single, right down a kind of 60-meter run, every kind of meter across, there were these fabrics that were going up and down and waving back and forward and all arcing around on different angles. And those obviously were the main thing hanging below the truss that people had to see. And then it still had to be lit. We still had to get sound in. We still had to get LED in. There was kind of trying to fit everything in. So in that context, like 3D was an absolute lifesaver. Wish I had my CAD open. I'd kind of show you the file, but the ability to know what height those things need to be, whether a light is being blocked by a particular route that the vein was taking. It's those sorts of clashes, really. It's that kind of clash avoidance thing, that I think we're trying to solve. Are you going to admit to it, Dick? Are you going to admit to it? That's my question.
So everybody knows that I looked at these plans and completely misunderstood these things. These voiles were vertical, and I thought they were horizontal.
And you know what?
Oh,
That's because you were looking at in your defense, you were looking at that plan in 2D, so it wasn't obvious. You were either looking at a PDF that I was sending you, or you were looking at, my drawing in draft site or whatever. But yeah, you were probably either looking at a plan or an elevation, and so you wouldn't necessarily see. I guess some of that detail. Do you see what I mean? Like I can spin the model round and look at something from any angle in 3D to look at whether there's any clashes going on there. But anyway, let's jump into it because we're going to run out of time. So Tom, do you want to drive first? Do you want to share your screen? And let's start with a set flat. Something which appears on many productions, whether it's used as a bit of masking or whether it's used as for a graphic wrap or how do we draw a set flat, or how do you draw a set flat in 3D?
That's a really good introduction. It's how I draw it. There are probably 10 different ways you can draw it, and people might disagree with what I'm about to do, but I personally would draw it as a front elevation on the ground level. So I'm looking at a plan view, top left-hand corner, I'm looking at the top view of this. I'm drawing a rectangle with a dimension of 1220 by 2440. I press enter. And then I'm going to offset this by 22 millimeters using the offset command, which you can just type in offset. The inside line, I'm going to explode from a polyline into a line, use the extend command to extend it to the edges so that the top and bottom rail are always going to the full width of the flat.
And that's because you know how they build it, right? You're close enough to the construction, you've done lots of drawings for workshops, and you actually know that the way that they're going to build that piece, or the way they're going to manipulate the wood in the workshop, is in this way, right? So that this is not like something somebody's taught you as such. It's something that you've picked up over the years from working and collaborating with people.
Absolutely, and until I go to a new scenery workshop and they build it in a different way. But yeah,
of course.
You're correct. So I'm going to use the boundary command now, which is BO for boundary. It's exactly the same as the hatch command, but it only produces a polyline. It doesn't produce a hatch. I'm going to make a polyline inside these lines, so that later on in the process I'm going to extrude. So there should be 4 polylines now. Which I'm just going to move a totally arbitrary measurement to the right hand side and delete the lines which I've got left over. I know there'll be a central rail, so I'm going to use the copy command to copy it onto the center line here. And now I'm going to draw a rectangle using the rectangle command, which will be the horizontal. So I've done it at the bottom here. I'll make it 22 millimeters shorter. And now I'm going
Why
to...
22? Why are you using 22 there?
So it's 3x1 timber, so
Boom.
either
Very good.
21 or 22, depending on
Yep.
which scenery company you use. So I'm going to mirror this element here using the mirror command on the center line. I don't want to delete the original, so I say no. But now I want to move this down by 11 millimeters and this up by 11 millimeters. And I'm going to then, what am I going to do that? I am going to move that down by 11 millimeters. I'm going to do a polyline from here to here. I'm going to use the array command, which you type in array. You select the elements you desire, which are these 2 elements, and then you use the path that I've just drawn as a polyline. So this path along here, I select the element, look in the right hand side, the properties, it's called an array. I desire to divide the line by a constant number of horizontals. So in this, I believe it will be 5. So those there are 5 equally spaced. So I'm going to press escape, select the array one more time, explode it, and then delete the bottom rail, the vertical path, and the 2 top rails. So now I have a 3x1 timber on edge flat. I'm going to use the command in the top left-hand corner that says top. I'm going to go to the left elevation. I'm going to select everything in view, and I'm going to use the rotate command and rotate at an arbitrary point. So at this point, in theory, I could use this top left.
Standing up your flat in 3D there, basically, even though it's still a 2D flat. Be careful, it will fall over.
You're entirely correct. And in theory, I could use this command here at the left to go front, top, etc. But I desire to use the shift, hold the shift with my left finger and you click the middle wheel with my right finger, and now I have this element which is technically a 1 pixel thickness, so there's no thickness to it, but it is going to be 3D in a second. I'm going to select the whole thing. I'm going to zoom into the bottom here, the move command. I'm going to select the middle of that, and instead of moving to an arbitrary point, I'm going to do 0, 0 and then enter, and then I'm going to do zoom extents, which is Z, enter, E, enter, and it's taken me and this element to the UCS, the 000 of this drawing.
So the origin, yeah.
On the timber layer, which I've got selected here, I'm going to use the extrude command. I'm going to extrude it, and I'm going to do a minus measurement. And I always get it wrong, but I'm going to do minus 70 millimeters. No, I've done it wrong, so I'll just do 70 millimeters like that. I'm going to use change the layer to cladding.
25.4, right? And then, would you say it was going to be 2 by 1?
3 by 1, so
3 by
70
1.
mil.
Yeah, gotcha.
So if I select this one element here in the geometry, you can see it's 70 millimeters thick currently. So I'm going to use the rectangle command, and so the UCS is how you draw in 3D, but I'm not going to do anything with the UCS at all. So in this circumstance, you can see
UCS. Let me just jump in there. So yeah, Universal Coordinate System, is that what it is, or?
Yes, I believe that's what it stands for, and it gives you an indication of where you are in the model space. So it tells me in this circumstance that up is Y, to the left is Z, and towards me is an X. And you can play around with that many, many times, but in this circumstance, I'm not going to play around with it, and I'm going to do my best by, to a certain extent, ignoring that is there, and using a rectangle command on a new layer. So this layer is called cladding. I'm going to select this point here, and I believe that it's going to want the thickness of the material first, then the height. So I'm going to do D for dimension. It's going to be 6 millimeters thick, and it's going to be 2440 millimeters high. I press enter, and then I extrude. And in this circumstance, I can extrude to a given point, or you could do 1220, enter. So that is a 3x1 and edge flat in 3D. I'm going to do a bit of cheating here. I've got 2 frozen layers, so I'd use the Thor all layer. Click on that, and I'm going to use the shift key and the middle mouse, and I'm just going to spin around to the back. So that's the back of the flat. And to emphasize why I do things in 3D, I'm going to go to layout space. I'm going to use the view base command to do a quick front elevation, plan, side elevation, and isometric of this element. And that's my 3x1 on edge flat.
Go on, Tom. That's absolutely amazing. But give us that last command again. That was an absolute piece of genius.
So view base is I believe it's a copy from Revit. Or I believe from maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So view base, you have to do a few setups before you can use it, but essentially it's asking you, what do you want me to view? You can either view something from Inventor, I believe, or in this circumstance, I'm going to view something from the model space. So everything has to be in 3D.
Gotcha.
So in this circumstance, I've drawn everything in 3D. I press enter. Where do you want to select it from? File, which I believe is Inventor, or model space in this circumstance. In my hand, it will give me a good representation of its opinion of the scale it should be. So I have no idea what it is, unfortunately, at this stage. I press enter for front elevation. And in my hand, I've got a plan or isometric. So in this circumstance, enter for the plan, enter for the side elevation, enter for the isometric, and you can continue if you so desires, but I don't know what that view would ever be, but you can continue. Press enter.
Tom, a quick question. Twice you've mentioned Inventor. What's Inventor?
Oh, yeah.
Inventor is mechanical engineering. So I think some huge workshops use it. So Stage 1, for example, use it for cauldrons and such, like for Olympic Games.
So Dick, it's a piece of software made by Autodesk, so it's in the same family of software, and so it links in with AutoCAD really well, or really easily. Revit as well, that Tom mentioned, is another, I guess, more architectural, some more parametric modeling based software, again in the Autodesk family. So some of these, I think some of the things that some of the shortcuts they've created in some of these other bits of software, they've sort of pulled back in so that you can make use of some of them as people have learned to sort of move back and forward between them.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my conclusion of why I draw in 3D.
And the
And
real answer there is speed, right? I mean, anybody
yeah,
watching that, like I was blown away by
yeah.
that
Yeah.
speed. I
And
don't
then
build my flat in quite the same way, but that was by far the fastest.
no, that's a really good point though, Dave. Is I don't necessarily say, I wouldn't say that that's the only way you could draw a flat, as well as it wouldn't be necessarily the same technique for everybody.
Mm.
But just as a quick thing that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, so I go on to top view. I do B for block. I do flat 1220 by 2440 millimeters, and I select the elements. I press enter. I don't change this center point because it's on 000 here. I press OK. And now this is where it gets handy, because you tell the production manager, I need 7 of these, because you can click on one of them, right click and select similar. And I've selected 3 of these elements. We know a little bit about it because you've named it in a manner which is helpful to tell a story to someone. Because that's why I always feel that you need to tell a story with any drawing you produce. You need to tell a story. So
And you got to think
that's
about who you're trying to tell that story to. I think that was really interesting from what Dick's point was, the story that he's trying to tell is different to the story that I'm trying to tell, but his who he's talking to, his audience, and who's reading that story, and he's trying to make sure he's speaking their language. So yeah, it's really, really
and that's
interesting.
what, I think Dick's drawing was incredibly clear.
Yeah,
And from my point of view, one way it was so clear is that it told a story with little or no text, which is a very, very hard thing to do.
yeah, for
That's
sure.
why it was so good.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Tom. That's fantastic. Like Dom was saying, like massive round of applause for that speed.
Cool.
Right, Dom, you ready to take it on? Like Dom had no
Nah.
preparation for this, so I've only just sprung it on him that we're going to
So
have a look at Vectorworks. But just a couple of things I'd say, like from my side, Dom, like I wouldn't actually normally put in quite as much detail in the flat because I don't necessarily care as much. So I usually do
no, I have to
a
say,
4 foot by an 8 foot just as a simple extrusion, basically. How about you?
yeah, very very rarely I do full construction drawings, mainly because I haven't spent time in workshops. So
Yeah,
it really is a guesstimate from my point of view. If
yeah.
somebody if one of the designers said I want to build like this, I would draw it like that. But my knowledge of construction is my weakest after video. But we'll have a quick play with it. But I wanted to show you first was we were talking about 3D and a show that did last year, which is the PUBG finals in Oakland and San Francisco,
Oh, that's a
and
nice
why.
arena you've got there, Dom. Where did you get that arena
Yeah,
from?
yeah, you drew it for me after I scanned it.
So
You'll
that's
see
venue
why.
from a laser scan. Wow.
Yeah, venue from a laser
Who
scan.
knew, right?
So yeah, so this is what we did with it. We put a lot of set in it, and this was a 3D model that if you had to draw this in elevation without the CAD doing an elevation for you or a section for you, it would take weeks. And this was being updated 2 or 3 times a day while we worked out what we did with winches and stuff like that. And actually, the main reason we did the scan was to work out winch speeds. These are massive parachutes flying above the stage. And so this is a section through the center of the stage to give to the winch engineers to understand the distances we'd be moving, where the spacing was around the truss. And you'd never get this detail out in an elevation from 2D. It would just be impossible. So that is the major reason I draw 3D, and then
And so
you'd never do that.
just to expand on that a
Yeah.
little bit. So I guess like you'd almost be if all you could do was draw in 2D, you'd almost be constrained by what you could draw, right? And I think that's what I've seen quite a lot over the years. Like a creative designer comes up with an amazing concept, but then they're sort of limited by someone's ability to do a technical drawing. And if they're limited to 2D, they can't necessarily even sort of I don't know what the word is, like conceive of how to actually deal with some of these radiuses, some of these angles, because it doesn't fit into an elevation and a plan without doing everything on different plans. Does that make sense, Dick? Really, I guess that's my sort of thing. It's like another reason to be doing stuff in 3D because the complexity of what Dom's working on here in terms of the production, nothing's necessarily on the same plane, right?
Yeah, I just to go rewinding right to the start of the session when you were talking about where we all started. I think I started on a drawing board. I'm that old, and
Wow.
so literally drawing pen and ink, and then moved to CAD later on.
Hmm.
And the ability now, and I think lots of people. I came through lighting, so my background is lighting, and we drew 2D. And there's lots of people still drawing and lighting in 2D. I still receive an awful lot of lighting plans only in 2D. But for me, I draw in 3D now solely because, as you said, we can very quickly tell where things are, what's happening. So this one we showed a couple of weeks ago, but this is a section, a very quick section of the venue we did 2 weeks ago, but instantly we can pull it back out to 3D. And I can choose by using something called a clip cube on Vectorworks. I can choose where that section line goes, where I want it to see. I can do it the other way, click a button, and I've got a viewport of that area. And to do that in 2D, to then bring that back from 2D, would be a couple of hours work. And with drawings changing so rapidly and so quickly, you'd never keep up with it. So I think if anyone can, I think the younger generations, those who you mentioned coming out of college now, all started on SketchUp. My 14-year-old son can draw in SketchUp, and in his head, he just draws in 3D. Why would he not draw in 3D? And I think there's a bit of a generational thing going through, but he draws in 3D. 3D is cool for him, and off he goes. So maybe the rest of us catching up slightly. Coming through, and it has got easier. I think Tom would hopefully agree. It has got easier over the last couple of years to do 3D and be working at a decent speed and not charging days away, just trying to get something sorted out. So,
yeah, the software, or AutoCAD especially, the software has got better, but also the generally computers has progressed massively since I first started in 3D. So it does, everything works much better together.
Yeah, and going back to that Oakland, coming back to this plan, this was seriously computer heavy as a full model when it was open. There was quite a lot of processing going on in the background there, particularly when you started putting all the LED screens in. So yeah,
amazing. No,
but going back to doing a little bit,
but yeah, no, just give us a quick overview of a flat,
first
and then
time
we'll need
you've
to
seen
finish.
that, isn't it? Yeah,
It
first time
is,
you've seen that, isn't it?
very, very cool. Amazing to see that where the laser scan was taken, sort of further down the line.
Yeah,
and I guess it's just worth saying, like, potentially as we plan things more remotely, I guess that it might be possible to do more of that type of work. We get a venue scanned by somebody local or in the region, and then kind of get it processed into something that we can use going forward. But anyway, carry on.
Cool. Hope you can see this. As I was ignoring Dick earlier, I was quickly drawing this bit. So in Vectorworks, here, for those who do or don't know, make a much simpler flat. I think in Vectorworks, just to very quickly to show, you could quickly show a space taken up by a flat by giving a size to something and then extruding out. So we 1219, 2438 for an 854 sheet. We could then turn this into a stage block by extruding it. So it just asks for a height. So maybe we want to extrude it 1200. And so we've got a block that would represent a piece of steel deck at that height. Equally, we can get rid of that. I still press X in Vectorworks. I still can't get used to it. Still press Escape. So if we do it again, give it sides, it's a bit like AutoCAD. You tap your way through it. So if we're 1200 wide for a 4-foot flat and gave it a 60 centimeter depth or something like that. So this is a 2D thing. It looks 2D. We spin it round. That's all it is. It's only a few pixels thick, as Tom said. But we can then ask to extrude it to something. So if we wanted to extrude it to 6 foot 1800, there we have it. There's a flat. We can come back into 2D again. And you were asking about duplicating, which I was ignoring you in Vectorworks. It's a duplicate array is what you do. But there's also another command that is a move and duplicate command, which I tend to use quite a lot. So you just suggest how many you want. I want 5 of these. You pick a point from where to start and where to go to. There's your flats we've just duplicated, and there they are in a row. And this is what I tend to do more of as indication, and then a scenery workshop would actually draw it properly. But if we wanted to draw it properly, I've made some component parts here, and it will not be as quick as Tom's or as good as Tom's. But here's some battening, which you can put together very quickly. We could pick it up, give it a point to go to. So let's pick it up from the end point, drop it off. This come up here, and then we could do a very quick. Come on, Tom, where are your eyes? Mirror it across, there, and then we could duplicate it into the center. Change this back to 1 from the center point to the center point, and then we'll select this one over here, and we'll mirror it across again. And then hopefully we come around in 3D. We've got a back panel, and we can then come back up a bit easier to select it all. I can add make the solids all to go together, so it becomes one thing as if it was jointed. And that is now one piece of material. You can double click in Vectorworks and come in and edit if you wanted to. That's one piece of material. This is a board, a backing, whatever you want to call it. It's exactly extruded the same way as these are extruded, just in a different plane. And we can pick it up and drop it on the flat, and then we have a component there. And exactly the same as Tom did, this is picking up a color from a cladding layer it's on. Vectorworks is slightly different. It has something called an organizational palette. So you can come in here, and this is where you control, a bit like layers. It's the equivalent of layers. Frustratingly, it doesn't stay open all the time. You have to come into it to deal with it. But you'd set up a cladding layer, and then you choose your colors, your line weights, etc., in there. This is also where we control. We talked about this briefly. Vectorworks has classes, which is layers, as in AutoCAD, and it has layers, which are beyond AutoCAD. AutoCAD doesn't have this, so this would be the what and the where we have. So the what is the classes and the where is layers. So in a lighting drawing, I tend to have flown gear, so everything flown, and I have everything on the deck. So I can easily filter what's flown, what's on the floor. You could have breakout room numbers, whatever you want, depending on what your show is.
Very good. And so I guess the other thing I think, which I guess you were mentioning to me earlier, Dom, is there are a whole there are libraries and libraries of these that are maintained. Is it by Vectorworks themselves, or is it by external people, or a mixture of both? No, so you wouldn't even need to potentially build that flat, because you'd probably just drop it out of a library. So with what you're showing us now, like, how much of that stuff have you had to manually draw yourself, and how much stuff is actually already? Sorry?
I haven't drawn anything in there. That's all Vectorworks materials. The trusses, the motors, the arrays, the ladders you construct around the thing.
Yeah.
All the lights come in. The staging is built from a staging tool. So I say how big, how wide it gets on.
So you'll set the parameters of the symbols, basically, but the actual library of symbols in the first place is kind of like a pre-existing thing. Now, presumably that means that some of it's not necessarily exactly the right thing, but would you say that normally it's close enough, or like often it is exactly the right thing? Like, you know, is a lamp's a lamp, for example, a projector's a projector. You can set all the parameters of it.
So the manufacturers, I don't know how well you can see this in my screen. So the manufacturers do subscribe to Vectorworks. They push stuff in. So I've got all the truss here, ProLight, which our dear friend Claire Self specifies for us to use a lot of time. So I've got H40V, H30V there.
So AutoCAD really needs to get on board with this, don't they? AutoCAD needs to bring out their own version of this, because all the manufacturers publish all of these things on their own site. It would be fantastic if it was actually built into the next, the 2021 version or the 2022 version now of AutoCAD, that there was somebody maintaining this library. Because Tom, I bet you've got all your own blocks. I've got all my own blocks. I've sort of recycled many other people's blocks. Is that the best way to say it?
Well, I think everyone does. Everyone recycles and shares.
Yeah.
But as I said to you earlier, that's it, just in lighting, on my lighting side of my work, that was taking a couple of days, a year, just to keep up to date with decent symbols, with the new lights coming out. And in the time we normally have in projects, somebody puts a new light on the job, and you got to spend 2 hours finding it, creating it. It's just as Tom said earlier, sometimes I adjust the seats. If I actually do know a seat size, I'll go in and edit the seat sizes or color material, stuff like that. But it gives me the ability. So as I showed before the other week, because they're 2D and 3D symbols, I can very quickly put a lot of information on. This is all attached to the hoists.
So all of those, what we would call attributes in CAD, are actually built in already into those libraries?
So built in. So they're all built in. So they come in as you bring something in. it comes into the object information palette, and you then apply attributes as you put stuff in, and you can come back and edit it if you want.
Yeah, yeah,
Change depending on what it is.
yeah. It's really powerful, really powerful.
So here you go. Yeah, there's a stage deck.
Yeah.
What rotation, non-rectangular, heights,
Yeah.
what kind of border do I want it?
Yeah, cool.
Deck details.
I think
ratings,
I don't know. I'll sort of gauge from some feedback, I guess, if people would be interested. But like, I almost think we could start the series again in like 2-minute videos or something, where we actually do a CAD version of how you do something and a Vectorworks of how you do something, and like a draft site version of how you do something. Do you see what I mean? As a sort of resource or a reference, just for people to be able to go back and remind themselves. Because that's the question I get asked every single week: is where was such and such a video? And because we were sort of spread around. First we were in lefts, then we were kind of in lefts and outside of lefts. Now we're on YouTube, into Facebook and lefts and LinkedIn. So it's kind of not everything's stored particularly well. So maybe we'll come back and do that. But should we just finish up today? Dick, do you have any questions or anything on what you've seen today in terms of that kind of 3D thing? And like, is it something that you think you'll kind of could be useful, and in what way?
It certainly could be useful. I'm going to really get ideas above my station now. So because I've finally caught up. There we go. This one. Can you see this? This is my first attempt. Incoming first attempt at 3D CAD. So I am learning. That's a loudspeaker with its little nominal coverage. I've got to work out how to stop them being too little 2D planes. I've got to learn how to do this properly. But I'm getting it. You know, this is my next learnings.
Very cool.
What I find so impressive, Dick, is we're only on hour 6 of training. This is our 6th session. We do about 45 minutes to an hour, and you've got this far, which is absolutely brilliant for everyone else who can come back and watch these. So yeah, so impressed. So impressed.
Amazing. So let's just go around the room again and say thank you very much for joining. Thank you and goodbye from me.
But before we go, I think we need to do a little competition between Dom and Tom, a sort of Friday night, who can do the fastest. And we'll award prizes.
Quick draw.
Yeah, depends on the prize, but yes, absolutely.
Good. All right. Thank you very much, guys. It's been a really good session again. And Tom, that was so fast. Like, I was blown away by that.
That was awesome.
That set flat.
Thank you.
I think with his new camera, we can see him going a little bit red.
I think so. Yeah, that camera's showing up. You're blushing there now. All right. Thank you, everybody. Great work again.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Have a safe week.